Hello and welcome to the KimIversen Show. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to get into today's guest pretty much right away. This is a gentleman we're going to be talking to, Dexter Taylor, also known as Carbon Mike. He has no criminal record. He has been an upstanding citizen his entire life, kind of a nerd, developing all kinds of computer programs and building ham radios and building furniture and just a guy that's an enthusiast into learning how things work and building those things. And he got into a new hobby of building guns. He thought that it would be, he likes firearms. He's always been a firearm enthusiast, and he decided that he could learn how to make firearms and then maybe use this as a skill to market. And instead, the state of New York decided that they didn't like his hobby, a hobby that was non-threatening. He wasn't trying to sell anything or commit any crimes or anything of the sort. And he's now facing 18 years in jail. So we're going to get his story, including the night that he was raided by a SWAT team, the time he spent in Rikers, and what the background of his case is and where it's at today. It is a fascinating and infuriating story. So I hope you stick around to watch this today because it may change your mind on certain laws that we have and just the treatment of certain people. And also just, with our rising violent crime rate, you'd think that they'd go after people who are actually committing violent crime. But we're going to get into that. We're going to talk to Dexter Taylor today. All right, let's get to our guest. Dexter Taylor, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, I want to start off by reading this press release that was released by the district attorney, Kings County. This just so that everybody gets an overview of what you've been charged with, what they claim. So we'll get their side, and then we're going to get your side as we talk. We're going to hear from you.
Absolutely.
So this press release: numerous weapons, both completed and unfinished, recovered from defendant's apartment, including 4 assault weapons, 5 handguns, and 4 rifles. Brooklyn District Attorney Eric Gonzalez today announced, and this was back in April 22nd of 22. So this was almost 2 years ago. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Brooklyn District Attorney Eric Gonzalez today announced the indictment of a Brooklyn man who allegedly purchased over $10,000 worth of gun parts online to build illegal, untraceable firearms known as ghost guns. Numerous completed guns and gun parts were allegedly recovered from his apartment. District Attorney Gonzalez said this defendant allegedly acquired a massive arsenal of homemade ghost guns that are as real and dangerous as traditional firearms by assembling guns from kits, unfinished parts, or 3D printed components. Those who possess ghost guns evade critically important background checks and registration requirements, and because they have no serial number, they are untraceable. The surge in ghost guns in our neighborhoods is a major contributor to the violence plaguing our communities, and my office is working tirelessly to stop the proliferation in Brooklyn. The district attorney identified the defendant as Dexter Taylor of Bushwick. He was arraigned today before Brooklyn Supreme Court Justice Phyllis Chu on a 37-count indictment in which he is charged with multiple counts of second, third, and fourth degree criminal possession of a weapon, criminal possession of a firearm, prohibition on unfinished frames or receivers, and 1 count of unlawful possession of pistol ammunition. His bail was continued at $50,000, and he was ordered to return to court on May 5th, 2022. The district attorney said that following an investigation, members of the New York City Police Department identified Taylor as having ordered numerous ghost gun kits and component parts from various online retailers that were allegedly shipped to the defendant's address on Eldert Street in Bushwick, Brooklyn. A search warrant was executed at the defendant's apartment on April 6th, 2022, and numerous items were recovered, including 4 completed assault weapons, 5 completed handguns, 4 completed rifles, 8 lower receivers for rifles, 5 lower receivers for handguns, 4 rifle magazines, 7 pistol magazines, 4 upper receivers, casings, bullet primers, and gunpowder to build ammunition, and various tools commonly used to build firearms. Okay, Dexter. Mm-hmm. That sounds really bad, but I want to start off by asking you,
why does it sound bad?
Why does it sound bad, right? So this is their framing of this,
right.
And then I'm going to ask you about this, and I want to get into your background of who you are.
Sure.
Actually, let's start with the background of who you are, and then I'm going to go into something that they said in this press release that I think is one of the more important parts of this story, if not the most important part of this story.
Sure.
That I think. Anyway, so just tell us, who are you?
Sure.
You've never committed a crime, so you have a
Never.
squeaky clean record.
Squeaky clean. That's correct.
You tell us about your hobbies, who you are, your background, your education.
Sure. I am a kind of lifelong, well, first of all, I grew up as a working class kid, right? I grew up in a union household. My dad worked heavy construction. My mom was a registered nurse. They're both retired. Lifelong New Yorker, except for 7 years I spent in Baltimore City. I'm a software developer. I've got 30 years in the industry, and I still write code every day. I started back I taught myself to write C++ code in the early 90s, and then I got my first job in the industry in 1994.
Where did you go to high school?
New York. I went to high school at Stuyvesant High School.
Okay, so you went to Stuyvesant. Okay.
Yeah.
One time I said that wrong on air, and everybody made fun of me. I called it Stuyvesant.
Oh my God, no.
Because I'd never heard of the school before. But it's a school for smart kids. I mean, this is where like smart kids go to school. That's why it made the news, because it was this elite school, and recently they found that it was majority Asians were getting into it or something. So it was like kind of had like a scandal attached to it in that way.
Well, I mean, that was racist Bill de Blasio, who seemed to think that there's too many Asians in Stuyvesant. Where I happen to think that, well, like if they make the grade, they get in. That's
right.
The least racist thing there is. So, but that's another story.
Okay, right.
Degenerate progressives and their nonsense, we'll leave that to one side.
Sure.
But anyway,
so you went to this school. You've always been interested in science, tech, building things.
I've always been a nerdy kid. I've always been a kind of a tech geek. And that's persisted. You know, I got into software. I started as a software developer, but I also started as like a hardware guy. I was building my own computers. Back when I used to live in downtown Brooklyn, my apartment was basically like a network lab. You know, I had my own. I was running my own mail server at one point. You know, building my own machines, that kind of thing, building networks. So I've always loved doing that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I built my first recording studio in 1999. I've just always been fascinated with, and of course, as a red-blooded American kid, I was always fascinated with guns, with weapons, with, fighter planes and tanks and so on and so forth. I'm a licensed amateur radio operator, call sign KD2LOM, technician class. I make my own furniture. I have a machine shop in my basement where I make, things other than weapons.
Okay.
To fast forward to a few years ago, I became fascinated with weapons, specifically with the so-called ghost guns. I prefer the term traditional guns, but, to each his own.
Right.
I found out that there were people who were actually buying legal parts online and machining receivers to completion and then adding trigger groups and so on and so forth and coming up with completed weapons. And I was hooked. I was fascinated. I thought that was just the coolest thing you could possibly do, the most traditional thing you could possibly do, making your own firearms. So I started with Glock-style pistols. I made 6 or 7 of those. And then I started with making AR-style rifles, and I made, a couple of bolt actions, and the rest were all traditional semi-auto AR-style rifles. And all of these rifles I made for myself, right, for me. I became interested in weapons science, and I was hoping that, one, my collection of weapons that I'd made would kind of serve as a portfolio, and two, I'd be able to kind of start to bring some of my expertise as a data engineer, because that's a subdiscipline of software engineering that I practice and have for the last 10 years or more. I'd be able to bring my expertise as a data engineer into the realm of weapons science. So at the same time I was building weapons, I was also developing, for example, a theoretical framework for semi-automatic weapon tuning called CEF, cyclic energy flow, which posits that a semi-automatic rifle is a kind of a mass flow circuit. And if you know certain things about the energy budget you start out with, you can kind of make inferences about how that weapon will cycle based on some fundamental electrical engineering principles. I designed a system called Drift 360, a dry fire training system. I designed on paper a system I sketched out on paper, I should say, a system to do automated quality assurance of brass ammunition, brass cartridges, because there's a lot of guys my age or older who are interested in what's called hand loading. And with hand loading, you can make your own ammunition. But a lot of guys my age, including me, Your eye starts to fade. Because an ammunition cartridge is kind of like a bomb going off near your face when it's in a rifle, for example. The idea is that you should be able to use like a cheap laser scanner and an Arduino to make a desktop scanner that can scan your brass for you and detect defects that the naked eye could not, right? So I was all in on this stuff. It was great. I was planning to, buy some land in New Hampshire, build a gun lab, build a range. And again, I built these rifles for myself. I wasn't talking about weapons. I wasn't posting pictures of weapons online. I wasn't planning or making any plans whatsoever to sell or disperse these weapons.
Yeah.
Or sell my services. At the time I was rated, I was a member in good standing of the West Side Rifle and Pistol Range, so I'd obviously passed their background check. I was also signed up for Rocket FFL because I wanted to figure out how I could what paperwork I would have to do so that when I moved to New Hampshire, I could actually get my FFL and practice this stuff legitimately for money, right?
Yeah. Right.
And again, it's not just that I have a squeaky clean criminal record. That's true. But it's also true that in my work online as a kind of a politically homeless conservative, I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, I've never done or said anything that would make a reasonable person on the street, a non-2A enthusiast, you see what I'm saying, like a non-gun guy, I've never done anything that would make a person like that think, this guy shouldn't be around weapons.
Okay.
See what I'm saying? Like, I'm not
Right.
talking any crazy mess online.
Yeah.
And by the way, the state should know all this because when they raided me, they seized my phone, haven't returned it. They seized my credit cards, never returned them. They seized my daily driver, my computer, my desktop computer, never returned that. They seized my work laptop. They also subpoenaed my email records. And they cloned my phone. I know they cloned my phone. I got a message when they did. So they know that what they're looking at is not someone who's building the term arsenal is funny. Like when I read that, I was like, all my friends in Texas are going to be laughing at me. Like, that's an arsenal, please. I was like, with your little tiny, 8 weapons. That's so, right? It's adorable.
Yeah.
But yeah, they should know all this. And I think they do know all this. The point is that New York State, I believe, is stuck in a kind of an ideological pocket. And so now they're in the position of having to take a law-abiding citizen such as myself and try to do me for 18 years for calmly and quietly in the privacy of my own home exercising my Second Amendment rights. I wasn't carrying weapons around. They broke down my door and ransacked my place and took my weapons and my tools and carted me off to Rikers Island, where I spent a week, right? So this is the kind of the overall picture.
Yeah.
Right? And my bail, actually, if I recall, was $200,000. The continuation may have been something else, but my bail was almost $250,000. My parents had to put their house up to get me out of Rikers. Right? Okay. Now, in a city, I have to say this, where people can beat up on cops on camera and walk, right? Yeah. In a city where adjunct professors from Hunter College can chase a cameraman and an adjunct professor can chase a cameraman down the street in the Bronx with a deadly weapon and walk, right? In a city where 2 people can throw a lit Molotov cocktail into a parked police unit, okay, and get a year apiece. New York State is now trying to look you in the eye and everyone else in the eye and say, yeah, this guy is so dangerous that we have to set a very high bail for him and we have to put him away for 18 years. And when they offered me the plea deal, right, they said 8 years instead of 18, I turned them down flat, okay? I am not a hard case. I don't want to go to prison, okay?
Right.
But I'm very sorry. I'm an American citizen, first of all, okay? The Second Amendment applies to me, okay? I'm a Black American who knows his history. So-called gun control is the quintessential, the prototypical form of systemic racism. They don't like to talk about that. They don't like to talk about that. They don't like to talk about what the very first gun control laws in this country were enacted in order to do, and that was to keep weapons out of the hands of freed Black men. You see? Mm-hmm. So it rubs me very much the wrong way, okay, that these people, on the one hand, I'm talking about Democrats and progressives in general, want to say that, for example, everything is racist. Math is racist. Precision is racist. Punctuality is racist, but not gun control. And it also rubs me the wrong way that they can profess to be concerned for my health and safety. They can profess that murderous white people are waiting behind trees and bushes to jump out and lynch me from a traffic light, but they're willing to violate the Constitution and fly in the face of the Supreme Court to disarm me. So, you know something? Like, take your plea deal and pound sand. Like if I'm going to go to prison, I'm going to run my mouth about it. But you have to make the case that what you're doing is right, because what you're doing is wrong. I'm a first-class citizen, not a second-class citizen.
Okay, let me ask you a couple of questions. Did you take these guns at all anywhere, like to a range and shoot them?
No, not nowhere out of the house, not even in my backyard. They never left the premises.
How did they find out that you had them?
ATF has been going around to to parts manufacturers. And of course, I was using parts manufacturers to buy receivers, to buy unfinished receivers, so-called 80%, trigger groups and barrels and so on and so forth. So the ATF went around to these companies and said, give us your customer list or else.
Oh.
And some number of them complied. And then ATF went around to local jurisdictions that happened not to believe in the Second Amendment as much as they do in, say, Texas, and said, okay, get this guy. And I was on that list because I was using these parts manufacturers, using my own name with my own credit card. There was no subterfuge. The guys who tossed my place know that all my weapons were in one place, right? And all my tools were down there in my workshop. There was no, because I never had any idea that New York State would somehow see a law-abiding citizen manufacturing his own hardware in the privacy of his own home as this kind of existential threat. First of all, I am not under any obligation to serialize a weapon unless I plan to transfer that weapon.
Right.
Okay? And the rifles I made, for example, Alpha, Switchblade, Ranger, Wildcat, Epoch, Scarab, Diana, and Mars.
These are all the names of your rifles.
My rifles, yeah. I built Diana for my daughter, named it after the Roman goddess of the hunt. Okay. I wasn't planning to transfer any weapons anywhere, right? So the idea that it's not serialized and that's a problem is, I want to say, a red herring, but maybe worse than a red herring, right? Because the fact is, if there's a crime, if a weapon is used in a crime, okay, if you recover the shell casings, if you recover the spent round, and if you recover the weapon, you can do a ballistic. There's nothing that's stopping you from doing a ballistics match, right, between a recovered projectile and an unserialized weapon. So the serial number is for state administrative purposes, but there was nothing to administer here because these weapons were mine. I made them in my own home, and I had no plans to transfer them anywhere or to anybody. And again, the state has had all my records, including my email records, since they raided me. They know this.
They know that you weren't on 8chan saying, I'm going to go and do these terrible things with all my guns that I just made.
Correct. Right. And by the way, not only do they know that, they also should know, if they've done their homework, that the kind of stuff I say online, the kind of company I keep online, is very different from that whole kind of fever swamp of the internet, right? So, yeah, I mean, they should know, for example, that one of the things I did here as a conservative was I did some local detective work for the Vietnam Wall of Faces Memorial, Wall of Faces website, excuse me. I worked with, I was a point man doing some detective work for Colonel Dana Quist, trying to find someone with my last name who was KIA in Vietnam. They should know that I've talked to theologians, I've talked to philosophers, I've talked to artists, I've talked to all kinds of people online, but the what I'm doing as a conservative is not let's take down the system.
Right.
It's like, no, let's be conservative, which means let's start with an attitude of gratitude and then virtuous building and virtuous political combat. They should know all this.
Right.
Okay,
right.
So there it is. That's it. I'm a first-class citizen. I'm not a second-class citizen. And all that noise, all that dumb noise they make about racism, again, having a kid in the school system, I've had my eye on this stuff, They've been, especially in New York City and New York, they've been telling our kids that, again, math is racist. Punctuality is white supremacy, right?
Right.
But when it comes to reinstituting the Jim Crow codes, Jim Crow gun control, they're good with that.
Yeah.
And what they're expecting is that not enough people will pay attention. So I beg to differ.
Well, let's Dexter, I'm going to do what I can to help you get more attention. I have some other friends who have shows, and I'm going to pass along your information to them if you don't mind.
Yes,
to
ma'am.
Try to get you even more attention on this, because I do think it's that this is infuriating on a few levels. First of all, just New York constantly battling it out with the Second Amendment. I think, of course, there's a case there that could be brought to the Supreme Court. First things first, and that is to make sure you don't get any prison time for just having a hobby and being enthusiastic and wanting to learn something and having no intention to commit any crimes with any of these weapons. So obviously there's the first things first there. And I hope that this resolves quickly, and that maybe you do get a plea deal. Like I said, a slap on the wrist where they say, don't do it again. And then you could battle the rest of that out with the Supreme Court on the Second Amendment issue, without having to sit time in prison. I mean, of course, that would be, I think, the first and preferable. Obviously, the best thing for them would be
the best thing is to drop the case entirely.
Yeah, of course, right. And go after the real criminals that are roaming the roads right now in New York. Also, I do have the link to I found this Give, Send, Go for you, this campaign to raise money for your legal defense. I'm going to put that link down below as well if people would like to help donate towards your legal defense. But Dexter, just really best of luck to you in this. I really wish you the best. Do you have these things can drag on forever and ever. So do you have any sense of a timeline of when a trial would be, or is it right now which is, I guess, a good thing. Look, you're out on bail, right? They're not keeping you in Rikers in the meantime.
Yeah, look, it's like the more, again, more time always works in our favor, because that's more time we have to do to spread the word about my story, right? It looks like they're talking about going to trial next month.
Oh, next month. Oh, that's fast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's not fast. Remember, I've been I got rated in 2022. So.
Right. Okay. So it's been 2 years. So yeah, exactly. 2 years later, then maybe you would see trial. I guess that's about an accurate timeline with the system.
It's much longer than it would have taken if I had just gone the public defender route, for example.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But then a public defender wouldn't want to be part of the whole civil. Public defenders don't care about civil rights and all this stuff.
They're not caring about the Second Amendment issue that's attached to this. Right.
I won the lottery when I got Varghese and Associates to be my legal team. So yeah.
Well, Dexter, best of luck to you.
Thank you. And listen, thank you very much for having me on your show, for taking an interest in this case. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, well,
thank you.
Good luck. I mean, you're strong. I know that this is scary. I know it's scary as much as you want to be strong and brave. And it is scary, of course. And I sympathize with you, and I do wish you the best. So I'll pass around your information, and hopefully we can get you on some other shows and get more awareness on your case.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dexter.
Take care.